Hello everybody and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite genre of board game of all time, and that is the really deep, in-depth strategy. We're not talking about easy to play, we're not talking about short, we're talking about hardcore, difficult, and fun. Alright? So, to get us started, I'm going to go with a couple of honorable mentions. My first honorable mention is a game that I'm sure you're all familiar with me talking about from GMT Games, Twilight Struggle. Yes, it's here again. The reason that it's here today is because, in the end, it is a great strategy game. You need to know a lot about tactics, strategy, outthinking your opponent, playing the right cards at the right time, and being able to deal with consequences of your actions, or even worse, your inactions. So that's why it's one of my honorable mentions. Now, why isn't it on the main list? The reason it's not on the main list is because it's only a two-player game. When I play really intense strategy games, I prefer to play a game that I can play with 4, 5, even 6 people. It makes it a lot more fun in my opinion and a lot more interesting. And plus, we all get to get a lot more competitive and really start getting into the game more. But in the end, it is a great strategy game, although it is only for 2 people. So that's why Twilight Struggle is one of my honorable mentions for strategic games. My second honorable mention comes to us courtesy of Fantasy Flight Games and is one of my favorite cooperative games of all time, Arkham Horror. The reason that this is one of my favorite games is, first off, I love the Lovecraftian mythos. It's a really great storyline, I love all of his works, and I just love to be able to be in that world. The other reason that I really like this is, obviously, it is an extremely in-depth strategy game, and you really have to work together very well as a team in order to have a shadow of a chance to win. Even then, you probably won't because you'll draw a bad Mythos card. So, why is it that this isn't on the list proper and is instead an honorable mention? Put simply, it's the fact that it's a cooperative game. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against cooperative games. I love cooperative games. They're some of my favorite ones of all time. But when it comes to really heavy strategy, there's nothing I like more than a really good competition. Right? You can't go wrong with trying to backstab your buddies at every possible opportunity. It makes a game a lot more exciting for me and also a lot more challenging, which is something I really like to look for in games. But if you're looking for a really heavily strategic, long-term game that you can play with a lot of people, Arkham Horror is definitely a good bet. In addition, this has a lot of expansions that adds new characters, new bad guys, new boards, pretty much new everything to the game. So it makes the replay value extremely big. So that's why Arkham Horror is one of my honorable mentions. At number 5, we've got an older game that comes to us courtesy of Mayfair Games, and it is The Settlers of Catan. This is a game that I have played for years and years and never get bored of. It has amazing replayability, it's got great mechanics, wonderful balance, and it's just plain a lot of fun. Now, like I've been saying, it's really nice to have a strategic board game that you get to play with a lot of people, and not only that, but you have the opportunity to do a little bit of nasty stuff to them. In the case of Settlers of Catan, the biggest thing that you can do is steal ports and good spots on the board, which is certainly some really nastiness, but it's not as bad as some of the other stuff that's coming up here pretty soon. But in the end, it's a great game that has well stood the test of time. It's a lot of fun to play. And not only that, but as far as strategic games goes, it's a little bit on the lighter side. So even somewhat casual gamers would probably enjoy this. So that's why Settlers of Catan is my number 5. At number 4, we actually have my personal favorite game of all time that I really enjoy playing and that fits somewhat well onto this list. Courtesy of Fantasy Flight, we have Cosmic Encounter. This game has had so many iterations over decades even that it's gotten to the point where it's not even funny anymore. I myself have this version as well as the Avalon Hill version of the game. But that doesn't mean it's any less fun or any worse or necessarily any better. But in this particular case, I love Fantasy Flight, and this is a great game. This is a great iteration of my favorite game. The reason that it's on this particular list is that you do need to have a good bit of strategy in this, and the one particular thing I enjoy in this game is that you have a lot of player interaction. You have a lot of really direct interaction with other players. Even though you have to go by the destiny pile as to who you're going to attack, there is a lot of intrigue in terms of who's going to be on your team, who's not going to be on your team, who's going to end up stabbing you in the back, are you going to use your alien power, are you not, all of that kind of stuff. Between the alien powers and playing with different people, you have virtually unlimited possibilities for playing this game, as well as incredible replayability. The reason that it's not higher on my list is because while you do have a lot of player interaction, the actual strategy boils down to who you want to help at the time and not quite necessarily longer term goals, simply because of the fact that you have such a luck factor in the sense of the destiny pile and you don't really know where you're going to be going at. But that doesn't mean that by any means it's a bad game. It's a wonderful game, relatively quick to play, and it's a lot of fun. So that's why Cosmic Encounter is my number 4. At number 3, I've got a game that comes to us courtesy of Rio Grande Games and virtually set the standard of an entire genre of Euro-style games. Dominion Intrigue. Now, obviously the original Dominion is the classic deck-building game, but I personally prefer Dominion Intrigue simply for the purpose of the strategic gameplay as well as just sort of the standard screw you of Euro-style games in general, be it Power Grid or Dominion or anything of that nature. Anytime you have a game like this, it's always not necessarily I'm directly going to attack you because I can and it's completely on purpose, but rather, oh no, that card that I just drew totally screwed you over. Ah, man, I'm sorry. If only it had screwed you over a little bit more, I would have been happier. The reason that I picked Intrigue over the original base game is, first off, Intrigue by itself is a playable game, and Intrigue with the village cards that you get to play with have a lot more player interaction actions that you get with them. And you can do a lot more essentially screw you type of tactics against other people. The reason that it's not a little bit higher on the list is because as far as strategy goes, you do still have a decent amount of luck that goes with it. Now, you can certainly pick which cards are available, but as you're shuffling and redrawing all of your cards, you don't really know what you're going to get. But part of the strategy, obviously, is learning to work with what you're given. So, either way, that's why Dominion is my number 3. At number 2, we've got a game that comes to us courtesy of my favorite publisher, Z-Man Games, and the same designer who brought us Mage Knight, the new edition. In this case, Dungeon Lords. This is a wonderful, wonderful game in that it's somewhat quirky simply because normally what you see in things like, say, Descent and Defenders of the Realm, or even things like D&D and a lot of video games, is that you're a good guy fighting the bad guys. In this case, it's the exact opposite. You're a bad guy who's just trying to keep all of those adventurers out of his dungeon and try to prevent them from taking all of his stuff. It's a lot of fun. Now, One of the slight downsides to this is that it's only 4 players. Now when I say that, I mean it is literally only 4 players. If you have 2 players, you play with 2 people and 2 dummy players. It's very, very well balanced, but the problem is it is balanced very specifically. Not that that's a bad thing, because the dummy mechanic isn't too difficult to get around. But in the end, what you've got is essentially a worker placement which gives you various actions. But in this case, the strategy is extremely deep. The thing is, it doesn't really seem like it at first, but things with trying to manipulate the evil counter so that you don't get the paladin, things of that nature, just to make certain that you get all of the monsters you want, get the adventurer that you want, and not anything that you don't. There is a great deal of thought and a great deal of essentially being accurate in what your actions are that make this game a wonderful, wonderful strategy board game. Now, just like with any really good strategy game, this comes at quite the cost, in this case, of being a fairly long game and the rules being really convoluted. It's difficult to pick up, but once you have it, it goes a lot faster, it's easier to play, and you will have a lot of fun with it. So that's why Dungeon Lords is my number 2. Last but certainly not least, we have my number 1 strategy board game, coming to us courtesy of Fantasy Flight. In this case, also being part of a major intellectual property that they recently obtained, A Game of Thrones. This is the 2nd edition of this board game that came out relatively late last year. No, it was a couple years ago. Either way, it's been out for a while now, and for anybody who's read the books and or watched the show Game of Thrones, you know just how convoluted a lot of the politics of the Game of Thrones can be. What I love about this game is that it captures that feeling very, very well. You have a lot of intrigue. You have all of the politics behind the Iron Throne, between all of the houses. You have everybody having to be out on their own trying to get the throne, but at the same time you have to band together to prevent attacks by other nasty barbarian type people. And in this case, I do love the strategy aspects of it. It's similar in a lot of ways to things like Diplomacy and Imperial, games like that, where it comes down to land control more than anything. And you've got a set number of troops, you've got so many troops that you can take, and you've got a lot of land that you want to cover. So do you make alliances? Of course you need to make alliances, but then what if you want to win? Of course everybody wants to win, so you have to pull forward. If you're ahead in certain categories, you get various boons throughout the game that help you substantially. And if you want to get those boons, you got to do better. Things of that nature. All of the different ways to win as well. It just makes this game a wonderful, wonderful strategy game. It takes a long time to learn and arguably even longer to play. But once you have a good, solid gaming group going that can play this with the preferable 5 or 6 people, this is an incredibly deep and wonderful game that will keep you coming back for more and more and more, as the replay value is also absolutely incredible. And that's why A Game of Thrones is my number 1 strategic board game. That's it for me. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you all enjoy my list of my personal top 5 strategic board games of all time. If you guys have any other ideas, if you have any other suggestions for great games, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I will see you next time.